Let me congratulate and applaud Senator Brown of Ohio for organizing this Speak Out on trade. In my view, if we look at why the middle class of this country has been in decline for the last 40 years, why millions of Americans are working longer hours for lower wages, why we have seen a huge shift in the economy from a manufacturing economy where people earn good wages to a Walmart economy where people are working for very low wages and minimal benefits. One, not the only, but one of the significant factors has been our disastrous trade policies for a number of decades. Mr. President, if people are watching this discussion, there may be some people who will say, Trans-Pacific Partnership, what is that? What is that trade agreement? What are they talking about? And one of the reasons they may ask that question is that a study came out recently which looked at how the major networks, they ask how the major networks are covering the T.P.P, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Well, it turns out, Mr. President, that the major television networks are not covering the T.P.P. Incredible as it may sound, this trade agreement, the largest trade agreement in the history of the United States of America, has received virtually no coverage on the major networks. And that, to me, is very amazing. Mr. President, I think it was Albert Einstein who made the point that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is sometimes called insanity. If we think that a new trade agreement based on the same principles of the old trade agreements are going to bring different results, I think we are very, very wrong. Mr. President, I remember, because I have been here in Congress for many of the major debates on trade, and I can remember that way back when we had a discussion about unfettered free trade with China. And what the argument was, well, look at that huge market in China. Look at all of the jobs that we will create in America selling product to China. In fact, we were told that permanent normal trade relations with China would create hundreds of thousands of American jobs. Well, not quite. Turns out, as everybody who goes into a department store knows, most of the products that we buy are made in China. And it turns out that permanent normal trade relations trade agreement with China has led to the loss of more than 3 million good-paying American jobs. And the reason for that is obvious. If you're a major corporation, why are you going to pay an American worker $15, $20 an hour, provide decent benefits, obey environmental laws? You could shut down here, go to China, pay people very low wages, bring your products back in America. And that's why when we go shopping, most of what we buy is made in China. Mr. President, we were told that the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, would create at least 200,000 American jobs in just a few years. Well, not quite. Turns out that NAFTA has led to the loss of about 1 million American jobs. We were told that the Korean Free Trade Agreement would increase American jobs. Well, turns out that it has led to the loss of over 60,000 American jobs. Since we signed NAFTA, the United States has a cumulative trade deficit of $8.8 trillion. $8.8 trillion. That's wealth that has left the United States and gone overseas. While the full text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership has not been made public, there have been some leaks of what is included in it. And what these leaks tell us is, in fact, very disturbing. I think it is obvious to anyone who has taken a look at this issue that the T.P.P. is just a new, easy way for corporations to shut down in America and to send jobs abroad. The United States, it is estimated, would lose more than 130,000 jobs to Vietnam and Japan alone if the Trans-Pacific Partnership goes into effect. And the reason for that is when you're dealing with a country like Vietnam, my understanding there is that the minimum wage is 56 cents an hour. 56 cents an hour. And you know, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I don't think American workers should be forced to compete against people who are working for 56 cents an hour. Mr. President, at a time when corporations have already outsourced over 3 million service sector jobs in the U.S., the Trans-Pacific Partnership includes rules that will make it easier for corporate America to outsource call centers, computer programming, engineering, accounting, and medical diagnostic jobs. Under the T.P.P., Vietnamese companies will be able to compete with American companies for federal contracts funded by U.S. taxpayers, undermining Buy American laws. If the United States is to remain a major industrial power, producing real products and creating good-paying jobs, we must develop a new set of trade policies which work for the ordinary American worker and not for large corporations and big campaign donors. And let me be very frank, as an independent, this is not just the Republicans who have been supporting these unfettered free trade agreements. There have been Democratic presidents as well. Corporate America has said we want these trade policies, and the leaders of both political parties have said, yeah, that's what we will do. But I think it is time to stand up and say enough is enough. This country now is in a major race to the bottom. Workers are working longer hours for lower wages. No American worker should not be forced to compete against desperate people around the world who are making pennies an hour. Corporate America, every night on television, in every ad that you see, tells us, buy this product, buy that product. Well, you know what? If they want us to buy these products, maybe it's high time they started manufacturing those products here in the United States of America. So I am opposed to the T.P.P. Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement. That's my view. But I would hope that every member is opposed to this fast-track process, which gives the President the authority to negotiate these agreements in the final terms. And that is because nobody has had the opportunity to really even see what is in the proposed agreement right now. Transparency has been minimal, absolutely minimal. So I think, Mr. President, if we are serious about creating decent-paying jobs in this country, if we're serious about raising wages, if we're serious about dealing with the other issues that have surfaced in terms of sovereignty, the idea that we would make it easier for tobacco companies to sell their deadly products to children around the world and make it harder for governments to protect the health of their citizens is an absolute outrage. It is an outrage. So, Mr. President, I want to again thank Senator Brown for helping to organize this event. I hope the American people stand up and tell the Congress enough is enough. We need to create decent-paying jobs in this country for a change, and not just in other countries around the world.
President, the United States is in the final stages of negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a massive free trade agreement with Mexico, Canada, Japan, Singapore, and 7 other countries. And I come to the floor today to ask a fundamental question. Who will benefit from the T.P.P.? American workers, consumers, small businesses, taxpayers, or the biggest multinational corporations in the world? One strong hint is buried down in the fine print of the closely guarded draft. The provision, an increasingly common feature of international trade agreements, is called Investor Dispute Settlement, or ISDS. Now, the name may sound mild, but this provision fundamentally tilts the playing field further in favor of big multinational corporations. Worse yet, it undermines U.S. sovereignty. ISDS allows foreign companies to challenge American laws and potentially pick up huge payouts from taxpayers without ever stepping foot in an American court. Now, here's how it works. Imagine that the United States bans a toxic chemical that is often added to gasoline. We ban it because we believe it is dangerous for people's health or harmful to the environment. If a foreign company that makes this toxic chemical wants to sell it in the U.S., it would normally have to challenge that in a U.S. court. But with ISDS, the company could skip the U.S. court and go before an international panel of arbitrators. If the company wins, the ruling cannot be challenged in U.S. courts, and the arbitration panel could require the American taxpayers to cough up millions, even billions of dollars in damages. ISDS has the power to impose gigantic fines, but it doesn't have independent judges. Instead, highly paid corporate lawyers go back and forth between representing corporations one day and sitting in judgment of corporations the next. Now, I don't know, maybe that makes sense in an arbitration between two corporations, but not in cases between corporations and governments. We should have real doubts about how likely it is that a lawyer looking to attract high-paying corporate clients will rule against those corporations when it's his or her turn to sit in the judge's seat. It's also a real problem that the only international investors get to use these courts. Investors that are, by and large corporations. If a Vietnamese company with American operations wants to challenge an increase in the U.S. minimum wage, it can use ISDS. But if an American labor union believes the Vietnamese companies are paying slave labor wages in violation of trade commitments, the union has to try to wind itself through the Vietnamese courts. Good luck with that. These rigged pseudo-courts were created after World War II because investors worried about putting money into developing countries where the legal systems were just not as dependable. They were concerned that a corporation might build a plant today only to watch a dictator confiscate it tomorrow. ISDS was born to encourage foreign investment in countries with weak legal systems. Now, look, I don't know if these justifications made sense back then, but they sure don't make sense now. Countries in the T.P.P. are hardly emerging economies with weak legal systems. Australia and Japan have well-developed, well-respected legal systems, and multinational corporations navigate those legal systems every single day. But ISDS would preempt their courts, too. And to the extent there are countries that are riskier politically, market competition can solve that problem. Countries that respect property rights and the rule of law, like the United States, should be more competitive. And if a company wants to invest in a country with a weak legal system, then it should buy political risk insurance, which is available. The use of ISDS is on the rise. From 1959 to 2002, there were fewer than 100 ISDS claims worldwide. But by 2012 alone, there were 58 cases. That's in 1 year. Here are some examples of recent cases under various treaties with ISDS provisions. A French company sued Egypt because Egypt raised its minimum wage. A Swedish company sued Germany because Germany decided to phase out nuclear power after the Fukushima disaster. A Dutch company sued the Czech Republic because the Czech Republic didn't bail out a bank that the Dutch company partially owned. And American corporations are getting in on the action too. Philip Morris is trying to use ISDS to stop Uruguay from implementing new tobacco regulations aimed at cutting domestic smoking rates. Now, ISDS advocates point out that, hey, so far this process hasn't hurt the United States. And our negotiators, who refuse to make the text of this trade agreement public, claim that it will include a bigger, better version of ISDS that will protect our ability to regulate in the public interest. But with ISDS cases exploding in the last several years and more multinational corporations headquartered abroad, it is only a matter of time before such a challenge does serious damage here. Letting a panel of arbitrators replace the U.S. legal system with a complex and unnecessary alternative on the assumption that nothing could possibly go wrong seems like a really bad idea. This isn't a partisan issue. Now, I don't often agree with the conservative Cato Institute, and I suspect they don't often agree with me. But this morning, the head of Cato's trade policy program said that ISDS, and I quote, raises serious questions about democratic accountability, sovereignty, checks and balances, and the separation of power. And he went on to say, these concerns about ISDS are, quote, ones that libertarians and other free market advocates should share. I think that's right. Conservatives who believe in American sovereignty are outraged that ISDS shifts power from American courts as envisioned by our Constitution to unaccountable international tribunals. Libertarians are offended that ISDS effectively offers a free taxpayer subsidy to countries with weaker legal systems. And progressives should oppose ISDS because it allows big multinationals to weaken labor and environmental rules. Giving foreign corporations special rights to challenge our laws outside of our legal system is a bad deal. So long as T.P.P. includes investor-state dispute settlement, the only winners will be international corporations.
I want to thank all my fellow leaders and the trade ministers for joining us here today. I know we all have very busy schedules, so I'm going to keep my remarks brief. We're here today because the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a high priority for our nations and for the region. As President, strengthening American leadership in the Asia-Pacific has been one of my top foreign policy priorities, and central to that objective is working with some of our most important trading partners to try to find ways in which we can facilitate increased growth for all of us, increased investment for all of us, improved jobs prospects for all of us, and what we are seeing is momentum building around a Trans-Pacific Partnership that can spur greater economic growth, spur greater jobs growth, set high standards for trade and investment throughout the Asia Pacific. And I don't think I have to explain to the press why this region is so important. This is the fastest growing, most populous, most dynamic region in the world economically. During the past few weeks, our teams have made good progress in resolving several outstanding issues regarding a potential agreement. Today is an opportunity at the political level for us to break some remaining logjams. To ensure that T.P.P. is a success, we also have to make sure that all of our people back home understand the benefits for them. That it means more trade, more good jobs, and higher incomes for people throughout the region, including the United States. And that's a case that I'll continue to make to Congress and the American people, and I know that the leaders here are committed to making that case as well. This has the potential for being a historic achievement. It's now up to all of us to see if we can finalize a deal that is both ambitious and comprehensive. The stronger the agreement, the greater the benefits to our people. So to all my fellow leaders, I want to thank you, not just for your participation here today, but more importantly, for the mandate that you have given to your negotiating teams to engage in some very serious work that promises to deliver greater prosperity, trade, and commerce between our nations in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Senator Ludlam.
Thank you very much, President. It doesn't give me a great deal of pleasure to rise to speak to this bill, but I want to congratulate my colleague, Senator Wilson, for bringing this bill forward. It still leaves me somewhat speechless that behind the scenes the Australian executive, through our trade minister, senior trade bureaucrats, are negotiating a treaty that would see Australia effectively subordinate state and national law to that of global corporate trade law. And what this bill seeks to do is take on one element of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is being negotiated in secret as we speak, and depending on which rumours you believe, may be as close as 2 or 3 weeks away from being signed and then presented to this parliament. This is a trade agreement being signed under cover of total darkness. And isn't it interesting that when the global community gets together to sign and negotiate difficult and complex environmental agreements, they happen out in the open? The negotiators from various parties trying to hammer out climate change agreements have to do that in open forum. And sure, there are deals done in back rooms and all the usual things that go on, but everybody knows what it is that Australia would be potentially signing up to. And when it comes to global trade agreements, not even the minister necessarily knows. I think the first thing that we need to get very clear about, we consider the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is that this is not a free trade agreement in the sense that we are used to. And it is not even being negotiated between sovereign governments. It is actually being negotiated between large corporate entities in various sectors. And those corporations, whether it be big pharma or rights holders, biotechnology industry, agriculture, take your pick, are then handing negotiating positions to trade negotiators in various countries and having them hammered into a text. This is an agreement being hammered out by global corporations in their benefit. It is an investors' rights agreement. It is not a free trade agreement. The little that we know about the actual text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we only know because whistleblowers have leaked draft chapters of the text, 2 iterations of the IP chapter, 1 iteration of the chapter relating to environmental protection, to the WikiLeaks website. And while that organisation has been hammered from all quarters, it has never been proven to be more important than now as the place where we can go to find out exactly what is being done in our name. So I congratulate Senator Wilson for bringing forward this very targeted bill. It obviously doesn't go to the entire scope of the Trans-Pacific Partnership because nobody will tell us exactly what that is. But it does go to the very specific notion of investor-state dispute mechanisms. One of those acronyms that might make your eyes glaze over until you realise that what it allows to happen would be for multinational corporations to sue sovereign governments. Now, this parliament considers itself sovereign, and I know from personal experience at the mob at the Tent Embassy and around the country, traditional owners would take a very strong issue with that the business of sovereignty in this country is probably the most important piece of unfinished business for us to confront. But the fact is that in the prayers that were just read in, and you would assume that those from all sides of this parliament come in here, charged with making and amending laws and providing good governance in the interests of everyone across this continent. Now, what happens if the laws that we pass in here are found to be offensive to the profit-generating activities of corporations on the other side of the world? That the Australian government, as is actually occurring, although I'm not sure many people are aware of it, could be dragged into a tribunal of unelected foreign trade bureaucrats and sued and forced to amend the affecting regulation if it impinges on the profits of a company on the other side of the world. It sounds insane, but that is in fact precisely what is being negotiated behind closed doors by the Australian government and, when they were in government, by the Australian Labor Party. one of the things that I hope whether it's Senator Carr or whoever speaks on behalf of the Labor Party will do when they are given the opportunity is actually put some cards on the table and make it very clear where the ALP stands. As my understanding is that they would be in support of Senator Whish-Wilson's bill. When they were in government, I think they did have form of opposing investor-state dispute mechanisms that would allow state or federal governments to be sued by corporations who found themselves offended. But it is not at all clear where they stand now. So I think that is another reason why I'd like to thank Senator Whish-Wilson for bringing this debate forward today. Professor Joseph Stiglitz, who's a Nobel laureate in economics and somebody who spends a fair bit of time thinking about these things, said the following: "The Trans-Pacific Partnership proposes to freeze into a binding trade agreement many of the worst features of the worst laws in the T.P.P countries, making needed reforms extremely difficult, if not impossible. The investor-state dispute resolution mechanisms should not be shrouded in mystery to the general public, while the same provisions are routinely discussed with advisers to big corporations." None of this is being done in the national interest. This is an agreement being hammered out in the corporate interest. If somebody as esteemed in his field as Professor Stiglitz is of that view, we should take that very, very seriously. We are fortunate, as I said, to those staff, campaigners and journalists in the publishing organisation WikiLeaks for having the bravery to have stayed in business despite the extraordinary persecution that's been meted out to them, so that we do have some sense of what is in the IP chapters. And there are some very specific concerns. I want to concentrate today mostly on an area that's very dear to me, areas around freedom of information, freedom of speech, digital rights, which are placed explicitly under threat by what we find contained in the IP chapter of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but also what happens when you bring investor-state dispute mechanisms to bear on some of these issues. A lot of damage was done when Australia signed the Australia-US Free Trade Agreement, and I think it has been government policy to try and avoid, if possible, forcing any amendments into domestic law as a result of the IP chapter. It is not at all clear whether that's actually the case, that we may be faced with a bill which we will be told on a take-it-or-leave-it basis that this parliament has to pass. I would also say, for those who may be following this debate from outside and may be a bit confused by the government's rhetoric of due process, that we have the Treaties Committee that is designed to evaluate mechanisms like the T.P.P. The fact is, I served on the Treaties Committee for 5.5 years, nearly 6 years. That committee will not get a copy of the Trans-Pacific Partnership until after the government signs it. And while the committee, in my experience, does apply a very critical eye to these things, the government is not bound to accept any of its recommendations. So the Treaties Committee will do the best that it can, but the agreement will already have been signed.